McGraw-Hill Ascent Audio presents Breaking into Venture. An outsider turned venture capitalist shares how to take risks, create power, and build life-changing wealth. By Allison Baum Gates. Narrated by Jessica Marchbank. Introduction. When I was a little girl, I had widely varying career aspirations. Briefly enamored by the cuteness of little animals, I had a veterinarian phase, but mostly I wanted to be some variation of a writer. I self-published my first book from underneath the kitchen table by the ripe old age of 6, culminating in a self-crayon illustrated fiction series called Dixie the Aardvark, which chronicled the misadventures of an overweight aardvark and her best friend, Missy the chicken. I spent my summers at journalism camp learning to write leads. In middle school, I even tried on the emo poet thing for size. I religiously chronicled all these ambitions in my journal, which I named Buddy, hoping that one day the journal itself might even become source material. I assure you, it has not. However, once I started to internalize the concept of money, then power, then influence, I worried that writers might not have enough of these things, so I shifted my aspirations toward being President of the United States. Disappointed by the fact that you cannot be president until you are 35, I thought I'd better keep myself busy and earn some cash in the meantime. So I started a variety of businesses, ranging from jewelry, beaded chokers specifically, to dog washing, to custom novelty pillows that I sewed at home on my grandma's Singer sewing machine. I would prefer not to totally bore you at the beginning with the full rundown of my winding path of endless curiosities, but suffice it to say that never at one single moment did I ever stop and think, I'd really like to be a venture capitalist. In fact, the first time I even heard of venture capital, I was in my early 20s, and I was embarking on a career on Wall Street. I did not know what exactly venture capital was, but I had learned that my ex-boyfriend, whom I had just broken up with, largely due to his extended status as unemployed and seeming lack of career ambition, had been invited to join a venture capital firm started by his billionaire fraternity brother. This was unremarkable to me until I learned that they had invested in a social media company called Instagram that everyone was talking about as the next big thing. The company was subsequently bought by Facebook for $1 billion. I did not know how much my ex had benefited personally from this sale, but the fact that, in a matter of weeks, he went from hanging around at my apartment all day to being a successful venture capitalist, VC, filled me with envy. How could he be so lucky? It would be several years before I found my own pathway into venture capital, but I suddenly had a new awareness of this mysterious industry that seemed to have its tentacles in every aspect of our daily lives. You may be thinking, venture capital seems cool, but it has nothing to do with me. Or, I've seen some pitches on Shark Tank, but I could never be an investor. Or, I don't know anything about venture capital. However, whether you like it or not, venture capitalists know about you. And we are investing in new technology that is changing the way you watch TV, search the internet, find your future partner, or drive your car. Not only that, we're investing in the technology that your doctors use to store and analyze your health information or track your pregnancy. We're investing in the technology that your employer uses to hire you, pay you, and measure your performance. Technology is changing everything about the world around us, and venture capital is fueling the next generation of influential innovations. In addition to shaping the fabric of the world around us, venture capital investing is creating a life-changing amount of wealth for its constituents. According to a recent survey, the median cash compensation for a partner at a venture capital firm was more than $900,000 per year. Salary plus bonuses for venture capital associates, who are typically only a few years out of school, reached $196,000. However, the lion's share of earnings for venture capitalists comes from the payouts from their successful investments. In the last few years, venture capital has outperformed every other asset class globally, returning as much as $659 billion to its investors and employees over the course of 1 year. To put that in perspective, that is more than the annual nominal GDP of Taiwan, a country of 24 million people. However, instead of venture capital returns getting distributed to millions of people, they are distributed to thousands of people. In fact, a typical venture capital firm has less than 100 investors and fewer than 15 employees. Despite all this wealth and glory, most of the successful venture capitalists I interviewed for this book also had very little insight into the industry before they became part of it. I can't count the number of times I heard, "I didn't know what a venture capitalist was until I was on the path to become one." They told me, "I never saw myself as a VC," or "I had heard of venture investors, but it never occurred to me that I could be one." I found myself wondering, how is it possible that an industry with so much money, power, and influence could be so under the radar? What is venture capital, and why is it so mysterious? Venture capital is a form of private equity financing. It is a form of financing because it provides the money that makes a new business or venture possible. It is considered to be equity investing because investors trade money for a percentage ownership stake in a business. As equity owners, the investors can potentially lose all their capital, but if the business is successful, they will share in the profits. Because there is no limit to how big a company can grow, potential returns for equity investors are also unlimited. By contrast, debt financing is when investors lend money to a business with the expectation of full repayment plus an interest rate. Debt investors are far less likely to lose all their capital, but the potential upside is limited. Venture capital is considered private because it does not happen on a public, listed exchange, but instead as a direct transaction between two parties, and, most likely, a bunch of lawyers. In a private transaction, the only information available to anyone else is whatever the involved parties are willing to share, and there are no standardized methods of ensuring the information being shared is accurate. As a result, private equity investing can be very risky for anyone without the experience, networks, or direct knowledge of the new businesses they are funding, the people building them, or the technologies they are promising to create. In an effort to protect people from making stupid mistakes investing in an industry with a high likelihood of failure and no standardized information sharing, the government strictly regulated who was allowed to make private equity investments and instead provided public funding for innovation and new technology development. However, everything changed in 1946 when the innovation of the atomic bomb led to the end of World War II and solidified the fact that superior technology was not just a nice to have, but actually a critical factor in national security. All of a sudden, the government had a clear motivation to incentivize even more investment in research and development of new technology for military uses, so it started offering large grants to public and private institutions, primarily universities, to work on whatever could save the world next. Around the same time, a man named Frederick Terman returned from the war to a role as the dean of the School of Engineering at Stanford University. He saw an opportunity to attract these lucrative research grants from the Department of Defense, so he aggressively expanded the university's science and engineering departments with a specific focus on developing new, innovative technology. In 1951, Terman established the Stanford Industrial Park, where he leased university real estate to high-tech firms like Lockheed Martin, Hewlett-Packard, and others who may have wanted access to the patented technology being developed at the school. Many consider this to be the birth of Silicon Valley as the center of the technology innovation and venture capital universe, as it is commonly seen today. Richest families in America were watching what was happening at these universities, and they started to see an opportunity to gain access to this innovative technology and sell it for use beyond just the military. The Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, and the Whitneys all used their family wealth to invest in innovative new ideas and bring them to market. Georges Doriot, a professor at Harvard Business School, and two other partners, started the first venture capital fund in 1946, called the American Research and Development Corporation, ARDC. They demonstrated the power of venture capital to their investors when they put $70,000 into a company called Digital Equipment Company in 1957. 14 years later, their investment was worth more than $355 million, solidifying that financing innovative technology businesses could prove incredibly lucrative for risk-loving investors as well. As the industry flourished over the next several decades, venture capitalists started to gain real and meaningful influence over which technology companies got off the ground. However, it was government regulators who held the keys to who had the ability to participate in the eventual profits. These regulators had to walk a fine line between incentivizing investment in the innovation that has made and kept America a dominant world power, and making sure that investors were adequately protected from downside risks in an industry that is so challenging to understand and navigate. The desire to protect investors typically took precedent, limiting the asset class only to individuals with a lot of personal wealth or well-capitalized entities that could withstand significant losses if the investments were to go to zero. Over time, as venture capital has grown in its success as well as its influence, major regulatory changes have been focused on democratizing access to venture capital as a critical funding source for entrepreneurs, but less so on democratizing access to the profits that the asset class generates. Recently, more attention has been called to the fact that keeping venture capital reserved for only the already wealthy has had an adverse effect on the types of entrepreneurs and businesses that those funds choose to back. Venture capital investors fund businesses started by their already wealthy friends, and when the businesses succeed, the rich get richer, and it becomes even harder for anyone without money to break into the industry. The result has been a stunning lack of diversity in both venture capital itself and entrepreneurship and technology overall. In recent years, policies have started to turn toward making venture capital more accessible, transparent, and accountable, and it has started to emerge as both a viable and desirable career pathway for aspiring professionals. However, In an industry that has historically operated on an apprenticeship model, formalized pathways for learning how to get your foot in the door or figuring out how to succeed once you're there are few and far between. That needs to change. If we want technology to lead to a better world for everyone, if we want technology to live up to its promise of democratizing information, resources, and opportunities, we need all types of people involved in the process of building it. Building investment firms that look like the user base of the companies they are funding will only be possible if we truly lift the veil, explain the real incentives that drive how venture capital works, and provide tangible tools and tactics for how to break in, stay in, and thrive. That is what I am here to do. Maybe you don't care about changing the world through venture capital, and that's completely okay too. You may be interested in the industry for other reasons. Even though it wasn't on my list of childhood aspirations, being a venture capitalist is also, in my opinion, the best job in the world. I get to spend my days meeting with intelligent, passionate entrepreneurs. I get to follow my sense of endless curiosity, choose who I work with, mostly, and play a role in imagining and building the future. Not only that, if you are good at it, you have the chance to build life-changing wealth. There is no limit to how much money you can make. If I had known this was a real job when I was younger, I would have started down this path sooner. But then again, if I had known how hard it would be to find my way in as an outsider, I also might not have tried at all. This book is designed to make sure that doesn't happen to you. My pathway into venture. One of the reasons I am so confident that you can find your way in venture capital is because I did, and without anyone guiding me. I did not go to business school. I did not start or work at a big, famous technology company. I did not come from a wealthy family. I did not plan on becoming a venture capitalist, partially because I didn't believe it was possible for me, and partially because I didn't know very much about it. Growing up in the Midwest, venture capital was never something I heard or cared about. Like many people, I was primarily focused on how to avoid becoming my parents. I loved them more than anything, but I watched both of their careers being constantly disrupted by technology, and it was a constant source of financial and emotional strain for them, their marriage, and our family. So I dedicated the first 2 decades of my life to doing everything I could to make sure it didn't happen to me. I woke up at 5:03 a.m. every day of high school to squeeze in a workout and finish my homework before heading to club meetings, sports practices, and a string of honors classes. I got into Harvard. I hustled my way to an internship at Goldman Sachs, where I endured footballs thrown past my head, and a culture where high-strung men were either yelling at me or trying to make out with me. I endured brutally early mornings getting everyone's obnoxiously specific coffee order just right, seemingly endless nights entertaining clients, and a nagging feeling that whatever I was doing was never enough. I thought I was doing everything right, but the financial crisis of 2008 forced every business into survival mode, and even formerly lucrative roles on the trading floor were being replaced by algorithms. The pathway I had envisioned for myself, working hard to earn a lot of money very early in my career, was not really an option anymore. Paychecks were cut significantly, many entry-level roles were automated, and a demand for more transparency in financial markets meant that margins were being squeezed and looming regulation created a culture of fear. Technology was being used to monitor employee conversations, to flag potential compliance issues, and even a colloquial abbreviation of a vulgar word used in an email or chat was flagged to our superiors. How could it possibly be that, despite my lifelong dedication to avoiding disruption from technology, it was happening all around me? And not only that, but it was only a few short years after graduating from one of the best universities in the world. If this was a problem for my parents and for me, it was surely going to be a problem for every working adult in America. I decided I'd much rather be on the side of the disruptor, in this case technology, instead of the side of the disrupted, in this case the finance industry. So I set my sights on getting a job at a technology company. It was an exciting time as Google and Facebook had only recently opened New York outposts, and there was a burgeoning local startup scene emerging under the ridiculous name of Silicon Alley. I searched local job boards, asked all my friends outside of finance, and started applying for whatever roles seemed to be a fit for my skill set. Unfortunately, the intersection between technology jobs, my economics degree, and my experience trading equity derivatives was very slim. I still remember the stunning silence on the other end of the phone call with a recruiter when I told her I wanted to work at ZocDoc, a quickly growing technology startup designed to bring transparency to the process of finding a doctor. She finally spoke up, though I wish she hadn't, because she said something to the effect of, "Honestly, I'm just not sure what you would do here." To say this was frustrating is an understatement. I was disappointed, disillusioned, and lost. My self-confidence was battered. I couldn't figure out what to do next. Worse, I was still trudging to the trading floor every morning, feeling guilty about my lack of gratitude for the opportunity ahead of me. I was still searching for ways to break into tech, so I started working on projects and attending events related to startups, and I came across a job opportunity at a new startup called General Assembly. It had started as one of the first co-working spaces in New York City, and its founders noticed that most of the startups working out of the space were desperate to hire employees with technology skills, but they couldn't find them, even though unemployment in New York and the United States overall was at record highs at the time. So the team decided to stop looking for tech talent and start making it instead. General Assembly launched classes and boot camps to train working professionals, like me, like my parents, like you, in the skills they needed to pursue technology jobs that they actually loved, things like web development, digital marketing, product management, and user experience design. When I interviewed for the job, I emphasized that I might not know anything about these skill sets, and I didn't know much about education either, but I was passionate about the problem they were solving, because it was my problem. Somehow, my passion convinced the founders to bring me on as one of their first employees focused on the budding education business. In a matter of days, I quit my once coveted job on Wall Street. My salary dropped by more than 50%, and I was the happiest I had ever been. It didn't even matter that I couldn't pay the rent on my Tribeca apartment anymore and had to move into my boyfriend's parents' house on Long Island. I was having a blast and making a difference in the world. Not only was I no longer part of the problem, I was building the solution. We were growing at breakneck speed, touching hundreds and then thousands of lives, and I felt invincible. How could I have been so wrong as to trudge along in my initial career path in finance when something this exhilarating was possible? Less than a year later, I moved to Hong Kong to set up our business in Asia. By that time, I had run hundreds, if not thousands, of classes for working professionals on things like coding fundamentals, establishing a business entity, effective Facebook marketing, brand building, and pitching your startup. Our most popular class of all, however, was Introduction to Angel Investing. We sold out class after class, even after I raised prices, added additional time slots, and found larger venues. I knew there was something more to do here, and it was interesting to me that more people were interested in investing in startups than in building them. Eager to capitalize on this seemingly insatiable demand, I approached Titus Michalski, the angel investor whom I had recruited to teach these classes, and I pitched him on building a more comprehensive education program together. Could we turn this into a full course instead of a one-time class? I told him it would cost him nothing and we could split the profits 50-50, although General Assembly would maintain ownership of the content we developed. After pretending to consider my proposition, he came back with one of his own. We met at a Starbucks tucked below a cobblestone staircase on Duddle Street in Hong Kong. I sipped my coffee and leaned forward in my chair, excited to hear what he had to say. He told me he was not interested in teaching more angel investors, but he had begun the process of starting his own venture capital fund and wanted me to join him as his partner. I was totally blindsided. Did he have the right person? How could I possibly be an investor when the only things I knew about angel investing I had learned from his class? He insisted that, in fact, I knew more about venture capital than I realized. When setting up new classes at General Assembly, my priority was to recruit amazing teachers. That meant that first and foremost, I was combing the entire world to find people that were absolutely amazing at what they were doing in technology, whether that was building products, running marketing campaigns, hiring teams, or raising money, and were passionate enough to want to share their talent with other people. Then I had to filter for the teachers with strong brands and personal networks, so they could tap into their existing audience as potential students. Finally, I had to convince them to come work with me instead of doing it on their own. That, Titus insisted, was really what being a venture capitalist was all about. With that, I took a gigantic leap of faith and joined Titus to build Fresco Capital, a global seed fund investing at the intersection of people and technology. We went on to raise tens of millions of dollars. Stephen Forte joined us as our third partner, and we invested in more than 70 companies, some of which have grown into billion-dollar businesses. I continued to call Asia my home, first Hong Kong and then Tokyo, though I spent the better part of 6 years living on an airplane, traveling to meet investors, founders, and influencers all around the region and the world. During that time, I grew passionate about changing the way the venture capital industry worked, but I feared I didn't fully understand it myself. I wanted more traditional experience in venture, and I wanted to be at the epicenter of the innovation ecosystem, so I left my life in Japan and bought a one-way ticket to San Francisco. I joined a storied firm on Sand Hill Road, Trinity Ventures, which had been investing in venture capital for over 30 years and promised to teach me how Silicon Valley really works. Caught in the crosshairs of a rapidly changing industry, however, the firm found itself growing less and less competitive versus larger firms with big teams who could add tangible value to businesses to help them grow faster. They were also losing versus specialized firms with deeper sector knowledge to inform their investments and unique expertise to help them grow. I wanted more of a focus and more of a competitive edge, so I went back to my entrepreneurial roots at another upstart fund called Semper Virens, where I am a general partner investing exclusively in B2B businesses, changing the future of work through workforce technology, healthcare technology, and financial technology. In addition to capital to invest, We have an extensive ecosystem of thousands of potential customers for our portfolio companies. The customers include the country's largest employers, insurance companies, and other distribution partners that can help accelerate go-to-market for new and innovative products and services.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?